I'm delighted to welcome you to our 7th Annual Mid-Atlantic Regional Conference and UNA USA Members Day at the UN. Our national organization and the New York and New Jersey chapters and the Southern New York State Division are really happy to host this event. I want to thank you, too, for braving these temperatures to attend, and you came from quite a few long distances. This shows how important the UN is to you and the importance of the issues that we are addressing. We are honored that the Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, will give the opening keynote address in just a few minutes. Our theme this year is the United Nations at 70, a year for bold action. In 2015, we are celebrating the 70th anniversary of the United Nations, starting with the signing of the Charter in San Francisco on June 26th, and its ratification declared on October 24th, the birthday of the UN. Work on the Millennium Development Goals will come to an end. Decisions will be made on the Sustainable Development Goals, which was the process to adopt the post-2015 development agenda. And in March, the 59th Commission on the Status of Women will focus on Beijing Plus 20, what has happened since the Beijing Conference on Women in 1995, and where we want to go. The 21st session of the Conference of the Parties to the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, a mouthful, is scheduled for December 2015 in Paris. Its important objective is to achieve a legally binding and universal agreement on climate from all the nations of the world. With all these important events taking place, UNA USA remains committed to enlarging the awareness of Americans to the importance of international issues and to expressing that in a strong, positive role of the US in the UN. Today's conference is enriched by hundreds of UNA members from across the country, including representatives of the Council of Chapters and Regions Steering Committee. We are happy also to welcome groups of students from over 30 colleges and universities, plus individual students from many others. We hope students from over 20 high schools are also participating. We hope you will learn many new things, gain new perspectives, share your ideas, make new friends, and take away with you a renewed determination to advocate for the United Nations to your chapter, community, and campus, and to your senators and congressional representatives. Your program gives the timing of speakers and panels. You can find biographies of the speakers at unausa.org/members-day. Please join in sharing this conference with colleagues and friends using the hashtag that you see all around you, and the hashtags UNAUSA and UNA Southern NY. At the back of the room, Joan Levy and colleagues are going to be staffing a table of materials from UNA, the Stanley Foundation, and the UN Foundation. The UN Federal Credit Union also has a table. Please visit these when you have a chance. Now, I would like to introduce Mr. Peter Yo, Vice President of the United Nations Foundation, who will give introductory remarks. As President of the Better World Campaign and Vice President for Public Policy and Advocacy at the UN Foundation, Peter leads the Foundation's strategic engagement with Congress and the administration to advance policy changes that support the UN's work for global progress. Peter joined the UN Foundation and the Better World Campaign in 2009 with over 20 years of legislative, analytical, and management experience, including senior roles on Capitol Hill and in the State Department. Peter holds a BA in East Asian Studies from Wesleyan University, as well as an MA in East Asian Studies from Harvard University. He is a member of the Council on Foreign Relations and a board member of the U.S. Global Leadership Coalition. Please join me in welcoming Peter.
Thank you so much for that introduction, and thank you all for coming today, for braving the weather, and for braving the security line at the United Nations, which is never an easy job. Today is a special day for both the United Nations Association of the U.S. as well as the United Nations Foundation, because it was this time 5 years ago that our two organizations began a historic journey, a journey that would lead UNA to become part of the UN Foundation family, but an even more resilient and vibrant organization. And our hope was to build a network of Americans from coast to coast in communities, on college campuses, in high schools, middle schools, that could make the case that the United Nations advances our values as global citizens, as well as our interests as Americans. And looking around at this audience today, it's clear that our hope has been fulfilled in this transition. In the 5 years since we took that first step, UNA's membership has doubled, with young people now accounting for more than half of its 20,000 members. This new strength could not have come at a more important moment, because today the UN is taking on more responsibilities, addressing more pressing challenges, and being asked to play a more critical role on the global stage than at any moment in history. So it needs voices like each of yours in the room today to tell the story effectively. I imagine everybody has been following this country's biggest news in the past 2 weeks, which is record-breaking cold. We've seen images from Boston to the Midwest of snow collapsing roofs, freezing temperatures, bursting pipes, schools being postponed or canceled, which makes my 16-year-old son incredibly happy. But, how many of us in the U.S. have been talking about the winter winds that are broken only by the canvas of a tent provided by UNHCR, the UN's refugee agency? How much do we hear about mothers like Awash, a mother of 4 young children who are spending their first winter in a makeshift home in Lebanon since fleeing Syria 7 months ago? We came here from Syria unwillingly, she told UNICEF this month, as the UN Children's Agency provided her with 4 sets of coats, scarves, hats, gloves, socks, and boots, clothes that her eldest, 7-year-old son will wear as he climbs to shovel snow from the roof of their tent. Because, as you know, they were forced to flee Syria with just the clothes on their backs. Who's telling the story of a dangerous mid-January snowstorm that unleashed flooding in Jordan's largest refugee camp? While hundreds were evacuated into emergency shelters, dozens of babies were safely born at clinics sponsored by UNFPA, the UN's reproductive health agency, which ran around the clock at full medical capacity. That's where Faraz Abdullah, a 37-year-old gynecologist, delivered 22 babies in just 48 hours. Wow. If it's not for the men and women of UNA USA, the UN's best advocates and its champions, who else is going to tell these stories every day to our policymakers? Who's going to sound the drumbeat to our leaders here at home who have the capacity to make or break America's involvement in the UN and the effectiveness of the UN's work on the ground? Because, you see, the wisdom of investing in the UN is clear to all of us in this room. Frankly, otherwise we wouldn't be here. But it's not readily apparent to policymakers around the country who need constant reminding about the value and power of the UN and who are bombarded on a daily basis by too many sources of information. We can't fix that, but we can fix making sure that they hear from all of us about what's happening and the power of the UN. Because we here in this room are the UN's best friend and ally. We are the storytellers for Awash and for Faraz and for others like Zahor, whose family used to run a textile shop in Aleppo. And it was great to talk this morning to Nick, who came here 3 years ago from Aleppo. She lost her husband and her home in the war. Like nearly 6 million displaced people in Syria and in neighboring countries, she struggled to put food in the mouth of her 4 daughters. But she now feeds them with the oil, flour, and lentils provided by the UN's World Food Program. So we are the ones who take note as well of the UN Security Council's bold direction to provide aid across conflict lines so that medical and surgical supplies can reach the people that need them, not just the refugees, but the millions of Syrians who are stuck behind enemy lines and are caught in a civil war, who desperately need help. And we repeat the call to arms when the UN Human Rights Council documents the atrocities so that the world may lay the case for war crimes. And someday, when, God willing, there will be a peace to keep in Syria, we may also be talking about the UN's blue helmets. That is, the UN peacekeepers who would be charged with transitioning a nation from the worst type of conflict back to order and stability. And up until now, I've really spoken about one part of the globe, Syria, and how the UN is sustaining lives. But elsewhere, over 100,000 UN peacekeepers are deployed in some of the most violent corners of the world, saving thousands of civilians from violence in South Sudan and the Central African Republic, pushing back a rising tide of extremism in Mali, delivering vital security in over a dozen other missions around the globe. And at the same time, the UN is providing food, shelter, and basic necessities to the largest refugee population since World War II. So it's also leading the global response to Ebola, measles, and other public health threats that know no borders or boundaries. But the UN is doing much more than just putting out fires. It's forging solutions to the world's greatest challenges, is building a global consensus and actionable plans to end extreme poverty within a generation through the launch of new global development goals. It's advancing gender and LGBT rights. And it's bringing the international community together in a meaningful way as never before on climate change. And for all of its feats, we here know it best, which is the UN can't do this alone. It needs all of us to stand behind it as advocates, as storytellers. It needs us to share the messages from our communities at home to the halls of Congress, that we are stronger as both Americans and as global citizens when our country helps the UN help the world. I said earlier that your being here and that your support comes at a critical moment, and it's true. Right now, world leaders are getting together in this building to set huge goals to make the world a better place. This to-do list for the world for the next 15 years is known as the Sustainable Development Goals. For Syrian refugees beginning new lives, for families in Mali or the Central African Republic, and for people the world over who want something better for their children, people like us, people like my kids. This will be the roadmap for a cleaner, safer, healthier world for all, and build on the legacy of the Millennium Development Goals. So this morning, we are incredibly fortunate to hear a variety of world leaders talking about global issues, including the Secretary General of the UN, Ban Ki-moon. The Secretary General has been carefully shepherding these new global development goals through the process here in the United Nations, thank goodness. And at the same time, he has been fighting to make sure that Syrians who are trying to make it through the winter, either as refugees or people inside Syria, survive, and that their rights are protected. He has also been an incredible leader on international LGBT rights. He has stood up for LGBT communities around the world and is encouraging countries to make sure that their laws protect the rights of LGBT citizens. You're also going to hear from a man, Hugh Evans, who has boldly embraced that notion of global equality and global development goals that serve all of our interests through his Global Poverty Project, which champions the notion of a rally of public support from global citizens such as all of us that will force our leaders to think big and make significant commitments on behalf of the world. Hugh is Australian and has something in common with many of the people in this room as a model UNer. such as myself, and he has demonstrated just incredible passion for development issues, brought a lot of energy and creativity, and most importantly, large audiences to global development issues, in which he has featured the Secretary General, featured UN leaders, and really focused intently on making sure that the global development goals will be famous. But I know that all of you here will embrace the UN's agenda, carry it forward in your work today and your work in the months ahead. But for me, what's really most inspiring about this day is seeing all of you here and knowing that as the UN celebrates its 70th anniversary, there is a new generation that is coming online that understands how the UN connects with something in themselves. So I thank you for your leadership, and I look forward to working with you in the years ahead. Thank you.